Welcome to The Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled you're here today because we are looking at something truly fascinating. In this format, we love taking incredible source material and distilling it down into a clear visual journey for you. And today, well, we're exploring one single, incredibly evocative meme that perfectly connects three vastly different realms of science and history. So what on earth connects large, predatory fish swimming out in the ocean, the tectonic evolution of a celestial body, and the industrial might of the Ford Motor Company? I mean, it sounds like a weird riddle, doesn't it? But the answer is actually just one word: Mercury. Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for today. 1. Mercury, the heavy metal. 2. Managing mercury toxicity. 3. Mercury, the planet. 4. Mercury, the automobile. And 5. The rise and fall. Part 1. Mercury, the heavy metal. You probably know it chemically by the symbol Hg. It sits right there at atomic number 80 on the periodic table. But what's wild is that this element actually cycles through our environment in three distinct forms. First up, there's organic mercury, which is mostly methyl mercury. This is the stuff we most commonly bump into through eating fish. Then you've got metallic or elemental mercury. This is that crazy heavy liquid at room temperature you might remember from old glass thermometers, vintage blood pressure devices, or even fluorescent lamps. And finally, there's inorganic mercury. That's elemental mercury combined with chlorine, sulfur, or oxygen, and you'll typically find that in industrial settings or, historically anyway, in certain cosmetics. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the dramatic difference in mercury levels depending entirely on where fish sits in the food chain. Honestly, this is exactly why your sushi order matters. It's all because of a process called biomagnification. Large predatory fish like swordfish and shark, they boast massive concentrations of methylmercury. We're talking 1.82 and 1.36 micrograms per gram. But then you compare that to a smaller fish, like farmed Atlantic salmon way down at the bottom of the food chain, and it comes in at just a tiny fraction of that amount, 0.014. Since methylmercury accumulates over time, the big fish eating all the little fish end up with heavily concentrated doses. Part 2. Managing mercury toxicity. So, what actually happens to the human body when exposure crosses a dangerous threshold? Well, the biological effects are severe, though they do change based on the exact type of mercury we're talking about. Organic mercury, like the kind from those large fish, primarily goes right after the central nervous system. It is especially dangerous to a developing fetus and can cause significant neurodevelopmental delays. In children, it can trigger acrodynia. Historically, they call this pink disease, and it causes severe pain and peeling skin on the hands and feet. Meanwhile, if you inhale metallic mercury vapor, that can cause acute lung injury. And chronic exposure to the inorganic forms, that heavily damages the kidneys and gastrointestinal tract and can even trigger profound memory loss and personality changes. So how in the world do doctors manage this? It requires a highly structured clinical approach. Step 1, always, is removing the patient from the source of exposure. Just stop the intake. Step 2 involves testing, usually testing blood for organic mercury and urine for metallic and inorganic forms. Generally, a normal, acceptable limit is anything below 20 micrograms per liter. Step 3 is absolutely crucial: monitoring. You see, the biological half-life of mercury in the body is about 50 to 60 days. That means it takes a remarkably long time for the human body to naturally clear it all out. And finally, step 4. If levels dangerously exceed 100 micrograms per liter, clinicians have to consider chelation therapy to medically bind and excrete the heavy metal. Part 3. Mercury, the planet. Okay, we're doing a sharp pivot here, a little palate cleanser, if you will. We are leaving the microscopic world of medical toxicology for a quick trip to the stars. It's just amazing to think that the exact same word used for a toxic heavy metal is also the closest planet to our sun. And just like Earth's chemical cycles, this planet is incredibly dynamic in its own right. As this quote points out, planetary images have actually revealed distinctive tectonic features. It's just a fascinating reminder of the sheer scale of the universe, that a celestial body sharing this name has its own massive internal and tectonic evolution happening millions of miles away from us. Part 4. Mercury, the automobile. All right, shifting gears completely now. No more chemistry, no more space. We are traveling back to 1938 America. Edsel Ford, the son of Henry Ford, realized his company had a massive problem. On one hand, they sold the standard, affordable Ford V8. On the other hand, they sold the ultra-luxury Lincoln. But there was a giant pricing gap right in the middle, and competitors like Buick and Oldsmobile were just stealing all those middle-class customers. So, to bridge that gap, he launched a brand new car named after the Roman god. So the crucial point here is the starting price of that very first 1939 Mercury 8, $916. Adjusted for today's money, that's roughly $21,000. It gave you more space and more power than a standard Ford, but it didn't require the massive wallet of a Lincoln buyer. And it worked. The launch was a resounding success. They sold over 65,800 vehicles in that inaugural year. From there, the brand evolved rapidly. Founded in '38, it proved its worth so quickly that by 1945, Ford merged it with Lincoln to create the powerhouse Lincoln Mercury division. Fast forward a bit to 1967, and boom, they dropped the highly successful Mercury Cougar, which was developed specifically to slide right in between the Mustang and the Thunderbird. By 1979, the brand hit its all-time sales peak, selling nearly 670,000 vehicles in a single year. And they didn't stop trying new things. In 1985, they even tried to capture the European luxury import market by launching the short-lived Mercury brand. You see, over the decades, Mercury wasn't just some slightly fancier Ford. It brought genuine flair and real innovation to the American road. Just look at some of these iconic features and models. They introduced the breezeway reverse slant rear window. It was this wild piece of design that let you actually roll the back window down while you were driving. Sure, it effectively turned your car into a giant vacuum for exhaust fumes, but hey, it looked incredibly cool. Then there was the Turnpike Cruiser, which paced the 1957 Indy 500. They introduced the absolute monster 400-horsepower Super Marauder V8 engine. And of course, we can't forget the legendary Grand Marquis luxury sedan, which was a staple for decades, alongside their big expansion into family vehicles with the Villager minivan in the 1990s. Part 5. The Rise and Fall. But, as we know, all empires eventually face a reckoning. By the 2000s, Mercury was really struggling. Their core buyer demographic had aged up into their mid-60s, and honestly, the designs of their cars blurred way too heavily with their Ford counterparts. Consumers understandably started asking, why buy a Mercury when the Ford next to it is almost exactly the same car? And this brilliantly illustrates the undeniable consequence of that identity crisis. Look at this steep collapse in sales over just a single decade. In the year 2000, they were still pushing over 359,000 vehicles. 5 years later, in 2005, that number nearly halved to just under 196,000. And by 2010, a dismal 93,000. The brand had simply lost its reason to exist in the modern automotive landscape. On June 2, 2010, the Ford Motor Company announced what had become inevitable. They were officially closing down the Mercury line. The definitive end came a few months later, on January 4, 2011. The very last Mercury automobile rolled off the assembly line at the St. Thomas Assembly Plant up in Canada. And fittingly, it was a Grand Marquis, the brand's longest-produced model line. With that one final car, a 72-year American brand legacy quietly came to a close. Which brings us to a final thought for you to ponder today. What is the true legacy of the word Mercury? Is it the heavy metal, biomagnifying in the deep ocean, carrying that lingering 60-day half-life in the human body? Is it the tectonic evolution of a distant rocky planet? Or is it the faded memory of a once great American car brand that so elegantly bridged the gap for the middle class? It's truly amazing how one single word carries such vastly different, yet incredibly fascinating scientific and historical legacies. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and hey, keep looking for those fascinating connections in the world around you.